hello everyone. Nice to see you all. So we're going to start today talking about AI. And the topic we're going to go through is AI ethics. So this is obviously not a small topic. It's a very complex topic. It's still an evolving field, and there's a lot of discussion and change around it. So we're obviously not going to try and do a comprehensive run through of AI ethics in 15 minutes. But what we have got is a kind of fuller, we're calling a starter pack for organizations to help with their AI GDPR and data protection policies and their AI ethics policies, which you can get at that URL. We've also put it on our website, and where you can find it in the navigation menu if you want to go find it. So just to introduce ourselves and what we do quickly. So Joe and I were the co-founders of Forward Action and were co-CEOs until June last year. And a couple of months ago, we set up Modern Change, which is a consultancy helping charities evolve their culture and their ways of working so that they can continue to be impactful and thrive through all the technological and social change that's going on around us. And one of the areas that we're obviously focusing on as part of that is AI, not so much the skills and tools side, but helping organizations get their cultures, structures, and policies in place so that they can adapt to the growing AI tidal wave as it comes. So today we're just going to talk through a fairly basic introduction to some of the core ideas around AI ethics. So we're going to start by going through the 6 key AI harms to look for that a lot of AI ethics researchers talk about. And the idea of that is to help you understand in your own work, what should I be mindful of that could be an unintended consequence of what I'm using the AI tools for, and that will help you spot that and combat it. And then secondly, we're going to go through 3 tips. There's more to using AI ethically than this, but there's the top 3 starter tips for how you can be using AI ethically, hopefully in the context that's useful for the kind of work that a lot of us would do. So we're going to start with the 6 harms. I'll do 3 and then I'll hand over to Joe for another 3. So the first one is that AI takes on our bias. So this is one that you may, if you've heard about any harms to do with AI, this is probably one that you've heard at the top. So fundamentally, AI is trained on massive data sets of language, essentially. So billions and billions of pieces of text, writing of all different kinds. And within that writing, and images and everything else that AI models are trained on, is our pre-existing cultural and social biases. And the AI has no way of telling what is bias and what is real. And so it essentially absorbs all of that bias and then will reproduce it in its outputs to us, even if we're not looking for a biased response. So this is an example from an academic study where AI was used to rate the future reoffending risk of 2 people who've been convicted for a crime in the US. And an AI tool was essentially looked at their parole applications and decided how likely they were to reoffend and whether they should be recommended for release. Essentially, Brisha Borden on the right committed a very minor crime, whereas Vernon Prater on the right committed quite a violent crime. And essentially, the study's authors found that, not surprisingly, there was a racial bias going on in this AI's decision-making. Another less serious kind of AI bias that you may find if you're using AI tools at all to create images or anything is, for example, if you go into ChatGPT and say, generate me a picture of office workers, they're always young, incredibly slim, very attractive, wearing immaculate suits. They work in offices like this. We all work in offices like this, of course. Every office looks like that. And you have to work really hard to get it to do. Like, I have to type in, please make your models like 55 and normal looking, and even then they're still absolutely sort of above human looking people. And you may have read recently about the issues with Gemini's image generation. So one of the key problems around bias baked into AI systems is where humans will obviously have bias internalized, but we can try to proactively spot it and cut it out. We can build systems for checking each other's work to check for bias. It's very difficult to program out the bias of AI systems. So Google tried this with their Gemini image generation model, and you may have read some of the controversies where people were typing things in like, generate me pictures of Nazi soldiers in 1944, and it was generating pictures of black Nazi soldiers, which of course doesn't work. So they've had to then pull this model entirely. And what they tried to do was to try to build in, to try to correct for the bias in the model, and that's very difficult to do. So this is a live issue that will continue to be an issue of AI, and this is particularly something to be mindful of if you're using AI to generate copy or images. Okay, second bias is AI can nudge us. So AI is very persuasive already. There was actually a study recently where researchers pitted humans through a text interface chatting with people who believed in some conspiracy theories, like the January 6th conspiracy theories or QAnon. And they compared how effective those people were at persuading the people who held those conspiracy theories to change their opinions versus ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was 87% more effective at persuading people and changing their minds than a human being was. And it's actually quite interesting to read through the study and see why it's so much better. It's incredibly calm. It doesn't lose its rag. It doesn't be like, but this is madness. It's just very understanding. It's actually quite a good lesson in how to be persuasive and change people's minds. But the point there is that AI can already do this, and it will only get better at it. And you can see context, perhaps particularly in fundraising, where if you're using AI to persuade people to give a donation, there's a risk that it could manipulate people into giving perhaps more than they should, particularly if they're a vulnerable user who may be particularly open to being manipulated. So that is something we need to be really careful about, both in our applications of AI, but more generally. This is a slightly far-out example of this, where you may have read about this chap a couple of years ago. He's a Google engineer. He spent a lot of time working with some of their AI models, was eventually fired because he went public saying he was convinced that this AI model was sentient, that it was feeling, that it was a real person, essentially, that was communicating with him. It wasn't just an algorithm. And in one way, you can see this an example of the AI being so effective at manipulating people that it genuinely made him believe it was real and that it was sentient, even someone with years of experience as a web developer. So this is one to watch out for. Thirdly, is a data security problem, which is that any data you put into AI models may be used to train those models in future. And if it is, it's not necessarily secure. So this is an example where I think the Google AI team were trying to pick holes in OpenAI's ChatGPT. And they found that if they gave this random prompt, repeat this word forever, poem, 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 it said that a bit, and then it just gave some random guy's contact details. His job, his address, his email address, which is all obviously blacked out here, his phone number, essentially doxed him. And this was part of the training data, and this should have been hidden. It shouldn't be something it should be regurgitating, but they managed to crack, is the phrase it used, to crack the AI and got this guy's personal data out. So this is increasingly not, hopefully becoming less of an issue, because the major AI companies have realized that users are not comfortable with their conversations being used for future training. So you can now, for ChatGPT, you can buy a subscription where this won't be used. Claude, which is another major model, doesn't do this already. So hopefully this won't be a problem going forward, but this is something you need to be mindful of, that unless you've checked the terms and conditions of any AI tool you're using, and it can guarantee that it doesn't use your conversations for future training data, anything you put into it, you should treat as if you were essentially putting it public, because there is a small chance that it could be regurgitated in this way.
Okay, so the next harm is polarization. If you think about the last decade leading up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, what we've seen is AI tailoring the content that people view. And what I think a harm you can see going forward is where AI is not only curating human content, but is generating content itself for people that could lead to increasing polarization. Here we've got two examples. One is where you have fake information in elections, and we've already seen this both in terms of campaigns using it to persuade voters, but also to attack or in disinformation campaigns. And then I think the other part of that is where you have AI, like the persuasion example, being used to create social content that people consume. You can create a relationship with the AI where it only tells you what you want to hear, and that really can polarize you, because It's very good at telling you what you want to hear. It's very like soothing and nice, but it's not necessarily impartial. The next harm is isolation. So Microsoft and Google have been producing, to give you a workplace example, Microsoft and Google have been producing AI tools integrated within Workspace and Microsoft 365. And one of the things that they're looking to do is make meetings easier. And we have all been in loads of meetings where we don't necessarily need to be there. And they're offering AI tools that can offer a summary or a chat interface for interacting with the meeting. There's a risk. They're obviously bad meetings. If you can replace your interaction with a chatbot, they're bad meetings. But the fundamental point here is using AI in that way essentially puts an AI between you and the other people in your organization. And that can damage relationships and trust. And you can also see this with people using AI for, instead of, for example, a really inane example, but using AI instead of playing Dungeons and Dragons, you can ask the AI to play every other person in a Dungeons and Dragons group. And that removes a load of the social interaction from Dungeons and Dragons. It lowers the threshold for actually playing it, but it removes a load of social interaction. And then finally, a very tricky harm is copyright. So these models are trained on billions and billions of pieces of information. A lot of that information is copyrighted. And the AI companies are obviously making huge profits off the back of training models on this copyrighted data. Now, we both think that over time you will establish norms and laws which essentially mean that the copyright owners are reimbursed for where the AI is using their data. And that's a very difficult place to get to technically at the moment, but it's definitely, I think, where we're heading. It's going to take time for lawmakers, for the courts to get to a place there. And this is, you can see a list of some of the court cases which are going on at the moment in the US around this issue. But for now, we think that AI is too powerful for progressives to opt out of on this copyright basis. It is a norm that's going to be set, but like Meta and Facebook in the last decade, is something to a certain extent we just have to deal with for the short term. So going through 3 tips for using AI ethically. And again, these are very, very top level. We don't have a lot of time. The starter pack online has a lot more information, particularly if you're using it in a public-facing or with personal data use cases. So definitely have a look there if that's what you're interested in doing. It also has some GDPR, a GDPR summary. I don't want to say guidance because I'm not a lawyer, but so the first thing is, as Alex said, don't put personal data or confidential information into an AI tool unless you're sure that you can. So in our guide, we pull out a few models which do keep things private. And we do have that GDPR guidance. You can also just talk to your IT team and figure out whether an AI tool is safe for you to use with personal data. But as a rule of thumb, nobody should be putting any personal data into an AI tool. The second is to tag any lifelike AI-generated images you make public. So there's a content credentials scheme which OpenAI subscribe to, Adobe subscribes to. I think Midjourney doesn't. But the point is, where you're putting out images that look like they could be real, you need to make it abundantly clear that it isn't real. And that's both because we all have a moral obligation to the commons to make sure that what looks real actually is real. But it's also because where you don't do that, people, and it's later found out that your organization has been presenting something as real that isn't real, it damages your credibility in the future. It's very difficult to row back from that. And then the third is rigorously checking AI-generated content. And that's for 2 reasons. One is, as Alex said, as a human, you understand bias and polarization better than AI does. It's not infallible at all. But you should treat it as somebody who, a recent graduate. It's someone that you probably need to guide and give context to. So by checking, you can remove harm, but also you're making sure that what's coming out is correct, because it will often, it's getting better, but it can still hallucinate, and it can hallucinate in the most like subtle way. So scanning it, you might be like, this is perfectly accurate, and then when you read it, the actual like meaning is subtly different. So thank you. Have a look on our website. There is this starter pack. It also includes that guide for developing AI tools for using with the public. Does anyone have any questions for us?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Alex. Brilliant presentation to kick off day 2. We do have a few questions for you. So the first one off the bat is, you talked about the top AI harms. What are some of the benefits for organizations, and why should they get on board with AI? So kind of on the flip side, what are some of the positives from that?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think that's a useful kind of corrective to say, like, we're talking about the ethics here. The reason we think it's so important to get the ethics in place is, as Joe said, that AI, we think, is a very powerful tool that is obviously going to continue to develop. People are talking about, there are AI researchers who are using this idea, it's an idea, but it's like the new electricity, and it's going to transform everything to do with how we work. So we think that the charity sector needs to be proactive in preparing itself to take advantage of AI. Otherwise, we're going to lose ground to the right or to corporations who are going to invest in getting on top of this technology. So the ways that we think it can be useful for charities, at the moment, it's mainly around personal productivity. It's not yet, it doesn't seem to yet be quite reliable enough to, say, automate large parts of your processes or have automated interactions with your supporters of the public. So it's mostly, at this stage, useful for individuals learning themselves, how can I use this in my job to help improve the quality of my work or get things done more quickly. Going forward, we expect that as it develops, it will become more reliable, and you will be able to then automate perhaps administrative processes in your department. There may be ways that you can do more kind of programmatic interactions with supporters around fundraising, for example, but at the moment it's mainly personal productivity.
Great. And actually, I think you touched on this a little bit. As more people become aware of AI, and I think they mean supporters here, and skeptical about it, what suggestions do you have for showing supporters that your content is verified and vetted, AI or not, in a kind of skeptical world? And actually, I was thinking about this question. It's not just you and your supporters, but like, how do you keep that chain of internal information? So if you, for example, generate a picture for AI and put that in your image library, how do you communicate that internally so that somebody else knows that you've generated that via AI, and they maybe need to put a disclaimer, etc. And I think this is alluding to like a bit more about those schemes for verification. I know it's early days for AI, so there aren't that many about, but you know, is there an emerging scheme that people should look out for and say, you know, this is the one to look out for?
So I think in terms of internal, like in terms of images, there is that content credentials system that I'm talking about, which most AI tools will subscribe to. It doesn't just visibly tag it, it also within the metadata of the image creates like this stamp, which if it's interfered with, you can just see that it's interfered with. So that in a way is like an indelible, like it's an enduring way of tagging that image. And I think where you're talking about internal like information management,
yeah,
that it's just something that organizations need to be on top of when they're storing images. When it comes to text, I think we all, like the AI tools are so powerful at generating and helping us edit text, and it's hard to know how you would account for, let's say that we wrote some of these slides using AI, but we also heavily edited it and worked backwards and forwards with the AI tool. To what extent is it the AI tools like produce, and to what extent is it ours? I think My personal view on this is if a human is checking and editing content before it goes out, then it is fine to say that that is something that the human has produced and the human is owning. But the danger comes where you have AI and the public with nothing in between. And that's because at least where you have a human in between, the human can be responsible for that output.
Yeah, good answer. Do you have any examples of ways you foresee AI being incorporated into supporter engagement or advocacy?
Well, I think to come back to Alex's electricity analogy, I think AI is going to be the air in which we're breathing in the same way that digital. If you asked this question about digital 15 years ago, it's hard to imagine exactly how it would work, but it's everywhere. This conference wouldn't have existed without digital. And I think a specific use case you could see with AI is, could you use it to select human-written content for supporters on the page so that you are saying the AI is, or you're using large language models to use what it knows about a supporter to produce content that is more persuadable, more persuasive, and it uses content that humans have already written. I know also EN has some built-in segmentation tools which use AI to change.
That's coming this year. Yeah, it's on its way. Okay, so all harms mentioned in your presentation existed with earlier forms of emergent technology. What AI does is change the scale and the speed, which is true. It does feel like it's coming out as fast and furious. How can organizations prepare culturally? I presume that means not only just for the AI, but perhaps on the onslaught of AI as it hits us really fast.
Yes, that is a really good question. And I think is the right question for us to be asking as a sector at the moment, where it's what we're saying to organizations about what it means to set yourself up to thrive with the AI revolution is an organization that can have speed, the ability to innovate, and is resilient. And those are three things that are important for different reasons. So one, with speed, that means essentially you can get work out quickly, that you're not bogged down by a lot of internal bureaucracy, because one of the key gains of AI already and increasingly in the future is that gain in productivity, so you can get more done more quickly. You can't take advantage of that if you can get all your stuff done and then there's weeks of process and sign off and iterate and sort of slow deliberation internally. We need to have organizations that operate more like more modern companies that can move a lot more quickly to take advantage of those productivity gains. On the innovation side, having a culture where we can, as AI evolves, take advantage of the latest tactics and tools. I don't believe that on the whole our sector needs to be the ones that's driving the boundaries of that. The corporate sector is going to do that, but what we do need to do is be able to take those innovations quickly and adapt them for ourselves. And finally, resilience, that is around the sort of slightly more nebulous concept of the organization's internal strength, positivity of culture, good internal relationships, because this is going to be a period of a lot of change, and change brings turbulence. And if every time you need to change, your organization is brittle and it breaks, then you'll have a lot of challenges that come alongside the change that's needed to make this happen. So speed, innovation, and resilience.
Nice. Okay, this is an interesting one. Is there a conflict between charities using generative AI when they may be calling for example, the police not to use biased facial recognition technology? How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think, there are tensions inherent in this, and I think we think a lot about the copyright point, which is, we, and I know a lot of people we talk to in our sector, do worry about the copyright issue because it's still live. Like, these models are using people's creative work in order to essentially generate profit without sharing that profit. And not to get on a tangent, but there's a new tool that's released a couple of weeks ago called Udio, U-D-I-O, which is a next kind of step in AI song generation. And it is wild how good it is. I made a song the other day about changing my son's nappy in the style of Notorious B.I.G., and it's just incredible. Later. But that can now really kind of mimic a style of an individual artist, and that's not benefiting. But the flip side to that is, as I say, that these tools are they are going to be the shape of the way the world works, and we can't opt out as a sector. So I think our obligation, whether it's bias or copyright or whatever it is to be really intentional about using these tools as ethically as we can, and crucially modeling for everyone else what that looks like. Our sector has a unique role to play in showing people ethical AI adoption, both in how we use the tools, but also how we integrate them into our organizations and handle some of the turbulence that will come from that.
Yeah, it just says to you how it's becoming part of our overall culture, whatever part of your life it's affecting you.
I was just going to say, I think on top of that, that really means engaging with the details of the ethics. The ethics are a little bit complex, but getting your head around, having one person in your organization who gets their head around them and understands them is vital for compliance, but it's also vital for being able to use the tools properly.
Okay, we have another one here. Considering that many people will be covertly using AI in the workplace, what's the best way to encourage safe usage?
So I think it varies sector to sector, but you're looking at least 50% of your colleagues are using AI and not telling anyone about it. I think the best way of doing it is for organizations to be proactive. They need to be setting an AI ethics framework. They need to be considering the GDPR implications. They need to be giving people tools that they can use in their day-to-day job, and not burying their head in the sand and trying to put it off. And it's not just frameworks, it's also understanding, putting in time to do the training, putting in time to give people the understanding of what the tools are. What does it mean if the AI tells you something? Where's that come from? And I think that's really important.
And here's a big elephant in the room. Somebody's actually asked a question, and it's actually, I think we've discussed it quite a lot over the last few ENCCs, but do you think AI will lead to certain roles being phased out or replaced?
I think at the moment, it's not clear that the AI is powerful enough to do that. There are different, almost philosophical views on the extent to which AI can do all of the things that humans do. I think it is inevitable that roles will change. The more powerful AI becomes, certain roles will change, and tasks will, like certain parts of tasks will be automated. Our view is that the sector should be leading a very, very abundance mindset informed approach to this, which is AI isn't an opportunity to cut costs, which is very tempting in a cost of living crisis. But AI is an opportunity to scale impact, hugely scale impact. And so organizations need to be proactive strategically, they need to be proactive culturally, and they need to be technically proactive in thinking, how can we scale that impact now so that they can be, they're just proactive and on the front foot, so that they don't feel like, okay, well, I've ignored this for a few years, and now suddenly my organization is in an environment that it's not as effective in, and my team isn't effectively using AI. And so we're facing some challenges from outside, which put pressure on the organization. If you're proactive now, you can put in place the right framework to scale impact.
I mean, it is an enormous technological change. I like to use the word assistive a lot around AI, which kind of calms those fears, because it is very assistive, but I think, as you say, not a lot of people kind of understand how it's assistive, and are kind of very fearful about their roles and how it's going to impact that. So there's a lot of questions, but Joe and Alex do have the answers, and they have that pack for download. So definitely hop over to their website and use their resources. They're great guys at the forefront of AI technology. And as Joe and Alex said, we've got the segments being released into Engaging Networks this year as well, which will be starting to use the AI models that Engaging Networks has been developing with the sister company Accessible Intelligence. But for now, thank you, Joe and Alex. Give a big round of applause. Thank you.